Alright, well, this video is called Be Useful. Um, Evidently, right? Obviously it is. Um, so what are we talking about? What am I talking about? Well, certainly this question of being useful, right? Why is it important to be useful? Comes down ultimately to what's the point, right? In our lives. Now, if you don't believe in God, which you certainly don't have to, there's no, I mean, nobody forcing you to, hopefully. Um, and so, without God, right, the question arises, what is the point? Because with God, you can say, well, your point is to spread the word or become like Christ or do all these things or act like Christ or whatever, or, find this transcendent realm. But without that, some people have come to the conclusion that there is no meaning or purpose. The absurdists, like Jean-Paul Sartre, right? They come to this conclusion that life is absurd, that everything in it makes no sense, that it's inexplicable, right? That your life shouldn't have happened, right? All these things. And then some of them say, well, then you get to choose your own meaning, which I don't find to be very, you know, very comforting, right? You're like, oh yeah, life is meaningless, but you get to choose your meaning. What does that mean? No, it's not how it works. You don't just get to, maybe a little bit, but you don't just get to choose your meaning. Um, we have a very clear meaning, actually, in our lives without God, from birth. And that is the biological reason for our existence. Now you may say, well, this doesn't matter. I'm not, I'm not a rat. I'm not just driven by sex or whatnot. And I'm like, okay, cool. That makes sense. We're not. We're smarter than that. Often I think that intelligence has led us to these worlds and this idea that, like Sartre, where life is meaningless. Yet there's infinite meaning, an infinite purpose to be found in our biological purpose for existence, right? So what are we? What are we doing here? Well, like psychology, right, and neuroscience, all these fields like them, rather, I should say, and them, obviously, have found that our brain is a lot of things, but there are certain parts of our brain that are focused on solving problems, right? Most of our brain is not. It's interesting. Like our brain is not. It's not like this is speaking, this is learning, or this this hemisphere. All of our hemispheres have been developed for. We don't really understand what reason. There was a reason at one point where biologically it made more sense for us to have that part of the brain, but then all the parts of our brain have been adapted and used by different things. So some people's language, you're right, language is used in one area, but can also then reading can be in a different area or in the same area sometimes. It's very interesting. But the point being, we are supposed to survive and have kids. That's it, right? And so how do we do that? What's our brain going to be doing to get us there? To solve the problems, right? There's a mountain lion outside the cave who's going to kill my kids. Okay, I need to solve this problem. Make a spear and kill it. Or, we're coming up with solutions to these problems. There's a river. This side of the river is going to freeze. I need to get over there where it's warmer. Okay, well, we got to cross the river somehow. Let's figure out a way to do that. This is what the whole point of our lives is to do, is to solve problems, right? To come up with solutions. And what we found is that with more prosperity, right, that we have now, and have had certainly to some extent for a long time, certainly to a lesser extent, more prosperity creates this boredom in people. Now, throughout history, this boredom has not been very widespread, right? It's only been up to the elites. And certainly they were the only ones who felt the melancholy melancholica, or whatever they may have called it at the time. But also, they were the scientists, right? Only the lords and duchesses were the scientists. And I think this is an interesting thing to think about to some extent, because let's think, what created, why is it all that only the lords were the scientists, only those who had money, right? You may say, well, they were the only ones who had the money to invest in all these things, and certainly they were the only one who had time to spend on it. And that's their truth, right? Is that because they had more money, they had more time to not have to work. And in that time, they created problems for themselves. Because they found, even then, right, that your life is supposed to be filled with solving problems. That's the whole point. And so, what did they do? They started solving these larger problems, right? For thousands of years, gravity was not a problem. Nobody thought about it, right? Because it didn't matter. There was a hyena or there's a mountain lion outside of my cave. I gotta kill it. I don't care why the mountain lion is sticking into the ground. It's all I've ever known. It doesn't matter, right? It's not a thing that's gonna help me survive. So why would I think about it? It's not even gonna cross my mind, because it's so low on the priority list. Yet now, right, or rather, it only became a problem once somebody had the time, the money, the wealth to sit under a tree and have apples fall on them, right? Then suddenly it becomes a problem. Suddenly it becomes this new age, this new understanding of the world, right? And as we have moved forward throughout history, and certainly to now, we've created more time for ourselves. We've gotten more freedom. However much we may like to bash on capitalism, it has created a world in which we have 2 days in a week that we don't do anything, right? That we don't have to work. At the bare minimum, well, maybe I shouldn't say bare minimum, but for 90% of people who live in these Western countries, they don't work for 2 days a week. They also don't work for 12 hours a day, right? You're not working 12, 13 hours a day because you don't have to survive anymore. And so in those extra hours, in those extra days, suddenly we're faced with this boredom. People have been faced with this boredom for so many centuries. And how have they solved it? By keeping their mind active, by solving problems. And we've seen, and certainly have found this in my life, when we're not solving problems, when we're not moving towards a goal, we end up falling into this melancholy or depression, as we often call it now, or blues, as maybe they may have called it before, right? And that is a result of inaction, right? And as such, when we aren't occupied with solving interesting problems to us, you also find that you create problems with your surroundings, right? Suddenly, I don't think these people like me. Suddenly, these people, I don't think they care about me. Suddenly we start thinking about the things that we thought we knew. And as Newton found out, sometimes that's good, right? Sometimes that means you discover gravity. But quite often, for people now, it just means you're looking at other people and you're thinking, I should be like them. I should be better. I should do all these things, right? And so you become preoccupied with these problems which are not relevant to your survival. And there's this great poem, well, a line in a poem, rather, I should say, by Herman Melville, where he says, like a bullet can undeceive. What he means by that is only something as piercing as a bullet can break you from your spell, right? That life and death. And we no longer have that life and death thing. right? There's no longer the mountain lion. So there's nothing stopping us from living our life just creating problems out of the world around us. Problems that are that don't matter or that don't exist. And all those serve to do is stop us from taking action. So you're saying, well, okay. So what does it mean to then be useful? What does it mean to then solve problems? Well, this is a difficult question. Certainly, I've read Man's Search for Meaning. And it's an amazing book, of course. It talks about all these intricacies, logotherapy, this idea that helping people find meaning can help them solve all their problems. And I think this is a similar idea to being useful. But he doesn't tell you how to find meaning, right? He just says it's important. So it's like, okay, cool, meaning's important, but what does that even mean? Well, what meaning is, even if you do believe in God, it is a story you're telling yourself. It's a story, and when I say that, I think the natural reaction is like, well, I'm not a loser who believes in fairy tales, you know? I'm a man of science, right? I'm a man of, or a person of intellectualism, or even, or maybe you just don't think some fairy tale is going to save your life or make you feel like suddenly your life has purpose. And I respect that. I'm not a bad guy. I don't think maybe all your woes are going to be solved by reading Rumpelstiltskin or something like that. But let me try to articulate what I mean by stories. It's something even the most scientific among us do. Is the story they're telling themselves is that understanding the universe will help better society, right? It's this understanding and seeing themselves as a part of that, seeing their lives as something, some contributing factor to a larger understanding, right? It's still this story we're telling ourselves. So now you're saying, well, what does the story got to be? Can I just be like, I'm a superhero? Can I just be like, oh, I'm president of the United States? That's my story. Woo! No, obviously, right? And that's maybe where you would jump off the train of understanding what I mean here. But certainly what I mean is that you have to look at your life, look at what you've been through, and say, this all makes sense as I have been led to, right? I think it's easier when you have some sort of God, but even if you don't, we just talk about the universe. Think about it that way, right? That every single moment in my life has led me to what? That's the question we need to solve, right? You, as a person, have a unique understanding of the world, one which nobody else has, right? And if you think, and it doesn't need to be, I hate that some people think that to have a purposeful or impactful life, you have to do something everybody remembers. You have to be Julius Caesar, right? You know, you're Alexander the Great. You have to be them to have a meaningful, purposeful life. Our world exists because thousands of people have died, millions of people have died, so that you can be where you are. Right? My, I guess, great-grandmother came to this country on a train, right? She bought houses for her children in San Francisco. She spent her life trying to make a better life for her children. Now, when she died, She had fulfilled her purpose, and she knew that, and she had no regrets in that moment. There was no pain. There was no feeling as if there was something left to do. To think that you have to have some purpose other than simply having a kid and raising them to be a good person, other than simply helping one person. Again, even if you don't believe in God, it's certainly even more if you don't believe in God. To think that you know what's important? Why do you know what's impactful? Why do you know what's better for society? Right? How do you know that this president will affect history more than you're helping this person cross the street? Than you're living a good life? Right? That's what to have an important and impactful story in your life, all you have to do is believe it yourself. It just has to make sense to you. Right? It just has to be that, when you look back at what has happened, you start to see this line through your life. And if you have the courage to look ahead, you can see that line leading you somewhere. We all know in our heart what is good, what is bad, what is right, rather, and what is wrong. And all that matters, all that you have to do to have a useful, impactful, meaningful life is to just choose what is right, to try, just to try. Because if you just decide, I just want to try to live a life where I do the right thing, your brain's going to be like, oh, I got to figure this out. What's the right thing? And it's going to be difficult to figure out what the right thing is, right? You're at college. You're like, okay, there's 2 jobs in front of me. Which is the right one to choose? And maybe, and people who say there's not a right answer, I don't think that's true. I think the right answer is the one you choose. It's not that there isn't a right answer. That's like a meaningless statement, that the world is meaningless. There's no right answer. No. There is a right answer. It's the one which feels right to you. Not right as in like, oh, this feels right. Literally right. Correct. This feels like the right path. This feels like the best path. The path in which I'm helping push forward our world in some way. Helping create a better world in some way. The last point I'll have on this idea of being useful is an idea that's sort of like, well, I don't like that I used like, to be honest, but as I move forward in my life, try to move better, try to be better, try to be more right, as it were. But we talk about in cultures and in many religions, there has been this idea of a promised land. What does that mean? What does that even mean? What is that? What is a promised land? It sounds like some communist utopian society where nobody pays for anything and everybody's like happy and all this stuff, right? But when you stop and you look at not simply your life as having a through line, having a story, having an arc, but you look at humanity as a whole having a arc, having a line to draw through, suddenly you see that we are moving towards something. We are moving towards something better. You would be a fool if you said that today we are worse off than we were 15 years ago. We are not worse off than we were 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 40 years ago. We have continued to be better, to live longer, to live better lives, to have more of this time which Newton used to discover gravity, which we now use to sometimes, think our parents don't love us. But we also sometimes use it to create these amazing AI. Sometimes we use it to think about how I can just make somebody's day better, right? And so when we look at humanity and we look at that through line, what is it leading us to? It's leading us to a better world. Well, the question then becomes, how have we gotten here? And how will we get there? Well, like I said before, we only exist today because thousands of people, millions of people, billions of people have died and who have stepped out their door, who have taken some step. That's all anybody has ever done. One caveman took one step further out into the darkness, then the next, then the next. Right? They all understood, or maybe they didn't, but they are a testament to the fact that change and this new world or a better world does not come about in your lifetime. It comes about because of your lifetime. It comes about because of your lifetime. Because you today chose to try to do better. That's all we have to do, is to always try to do better, to try to live longer, to try to live better lives, to try to just make people a little happier, right? To do what is right. Occupy your mind with that. We all do different things. We all have different jobs, different lives. But in any given field, or profession, or occupation, just trying to live right, to do the right thing, that's all you have to do to have a useful life. It's all anybody has ever done, to have a useful life.